photography kids. So we are on to making our perspective room project, and it has a lot of steps and it's a little involved, so I figured a video might help out. First thing I did here was I downloaded the template from Google Classroom, and then I opened the pictures I want to put into my design, as well as found a sample of some hardwood flooring to make the floor for my room. Alright, I'm going to start by taking the magic wand tool and selecting one wall, and I'm going to add a gradient to that to create a color heading back in space. And you just want to be consistent so that if you go from light to dark or dark to light, that's going to reference which direction the light is moving, and that's up to you. So I have picked this kind of pretty blue color for my darker tone, and then I'll go with like a very light gray for my lighter tone, and I'm going to click and drag the gradient tool, and it will only fill in wall with the color. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. There's a couple options here. I can deselect and then take the magic wand tool and select the other wall and apply the same gradient. I could also copy paste what I did here and place it over here by flipping it, but it's pretty easy to just repeat the same steps. Control D will deselect that. Now the back wall is just flat. I don't have to really worry about it being a gradient or anything, so I'll just take the paint bucket and fill it. Now for my floor, I'm going to select the floor. I'm going to do Control C, Control V, and paste it to its own layer. So here you see that it's on its own layer. I'm going to drag and drop the hardwood flooring sample up into my template area. And this one was a really nice high resolution one I was able to get, and I'll resize it. Before I group it to the shape there, I'm going to do a little perspective skewing, and that is found up here at the image menu, transform, and you're going to choose the word perspective. You just have to grab one corner and pull those in. I kind of like to watch that back wall and get it to be as close to the width of the back wall as I can. And then same thing here. I'm going to kind of make that even a little bigger than it needs to be, so that when I hit Control G, I can kind of make my adjustments so my hardwood floor looks like it's heading back into perspective into my room. And then lastly, this is kind of optional. I have a very, very light gray color here. It might be hard to see. I'm going to fill the ceiling with the light gray, just so it's not completely white. I'm not going to be making any changes to these layers at this point, so it kind of makes sense to merge them down so nothing gets moved around or changed when I move on to the next steps. Now I want to put these photos onto the walls, and I could just drag and drop the photo. It's going to be much bigger than it needs to be. Just scroll out a little bit so I can resize it, and I could just place it right there on the wall like this and just have it be a rectangle. Or I can put them into frames, and the frames is where you can kind of really start to play around with textures and colors and other shapes and give it some character. So I have the custom shape tool here, and I already went to all the frames. There's sizes for the thumbnails, and then here are the frames. There's a bunch of different kinds with rounded edges and little details and stuff. I think I'm just going to go with something relatively simple like this one, and I'll start by drawing one there on my wall. This is now the same color as my ceiling, which maybe that works. I think I'm going to go with a darker gray color for the frames, not solid black, but a little bit on the darker gray side. So that's just the outside shape. Now I need to make the inside shape by using the wand tool, clicking the middle of the frame. It's going to ask me if I want to simplify the layer, and the answer is yes, okay. And now that layer has been simplified, there's a checkerboard behind it, and I have the inside of the frame selected. I'm going to click for a new layer, take my paint bucket, and fill. Control D to deselect. So I have my shape, I have my inside of that shape on two separate layers, and that's very important. Before going forward and doing anything else, I'm going to duplicate these layers with the move tool here. Press and hold Alt. Watch, the move tool goes from a single move to two, and I can instantly duplicate my frame with the shape. And then I'll make this one a little smaller, because anything further away from you is going to be smaller. And then duplicate that again if I wanted to use the same frame for the whole space. For the sake of time, I'll do that. Okay, so now I have 5 frames. 2 on this wall, 2 on this wall, 1 on the back wall. The 2 on these side walls will eventually need to go into perspective, but not yet. That's a mistake students make, is they'll put the frames in perspective before the pictures are there. So I think I'll click on this shape in the middle, drag and drop this kayaking picture. I have to scroll out so I can resize it much smaller, and then Control G to group it and get a little more balanced composition there, get some of the sky. Great. Then on this side, I'm going to do our family picture here that we took. Drag and drop it. Scroll out so I can resize really quickly and easily. Scroll back in. This one I'm going to leave pretty big because we are small in the picture, and I'm going to group that right there. Put us off to the side a little bit. And I can even edit this picture right here on the layer and just brighten it up a little bit. Side wall, I'll put my daughter having an ice cream sundae. She's very excited about that. Control G to group her into that frame, and I can always move her around, make adjustments after. Click this frame shape. My son will go there with his ice cream sundae. They ate about a quarter of them, and then I ate some. I think my husband had a couple bites, and that was it. They were pretty big sundaes. Control G to group, and resize him a little bit there. Okay, and then on the back wall here, I have this tiny frame, but when we end up printing it out and putting it all together, it's kind of good to have that scale, have that change of size. Here's just this last picture I took as we were exiting our cruise ship, where we could see the name of the ship there. So I will do Control G to group that, zoom in, resize it a little bit more, and there we go. Okay, so this is almost done. This would be a good point to save your work so you can go back to it another time. You can save at any point. You want to make sure you're saving as layers, saving as a Photoshop file, not flattening anything down just yet. All right. So this part seems complicated, but it's actually pretty simple if you just follow these rules. I click on the frame, so I'm looking at the layers. I'm not really looking at my template. And then above that frame should be the inside shape and then the photo group to it. I'm going to press and hold Shift and select all 3 of those layers at once, so they all turn black. I would be able to move it around as a group at this point, but the important thing here is to put it in perspective. So I'm going to do that by going Image, Transform, Perspective. I'm going to grab the top corner and just pull it up until this line looks a lot like this line, that they're at the same angle. And then I'm going to accept that. And it's going to look weird, and it should, because we're looking at it at a very flat angle right now, and we are going to end up folding this and changing this. So I'm just going to go and do that for each one. Grab that top corner and put it in perspective to match as closely as we can. I'll come back over here, select all 3 layers by holding Shift, transform, perspective, top corner. And because I left our picture so big, I'm just going to have to move this one over a little bit, but nothing too crazy. Click which frame I'm going to work with, press Shift, select all 3 layers, image, transform, perspective, put them in perspective. Okay, I could completely stop there and this would satisfy the project, but if I really, really want to do something extra special, I can go to any of the layers that say shape on them, and up here I have my effects palette open. I can add bevels, which kind of give that little pop to the frame, and that's kind of a fun feature. To give it even more dimension. If you really, really wanted to push it, we could come to the shape layer and add a drop shadow. That can also really enhance the idea that it's coming off of the wall. But just for the sake of time here in the video, I'm not going to go through and put drop shadows on everything. So I'll just undo that. All right, at this point, I'm going to go to File, Save As, make sure I know where I'm saving it to. So since I had downloaded the template from Google Classroom just directly into Photoshop, I'm in my temporary folder. That's not where I want to be. I want to go over to a photography folder, and I'll just give this my last name and the word room and hit save. Okay, so now it is a Photoshop file with all these layers, and when you hand it in, it's fine to hand it in like this, because then if you have something wrong, a perspective or something that you need some help with, I can change it. One last thing that I like to do before I print them, and I can do this for you or you can do it yourself, is I click on the background layer and I go back and pick another one of those shades of light gray. Fill that outline with the light gray so that when you fold it and put it together, the lines just sort of disappear, and it really helps the illusion even more so. All right, so that's how you take the template, make the colors, make the floor, make the frames. I know it's a lot of steps, but since it's a video, you can then pause it and replay it as needed. And I hope it's a project that you guys enjoy. Thanks a lot.